Okay, everyone, here's another From Trash to Treasure feeder idea. Has vitamin water or Gatorade bottles, cut, hot glued. It would be better if these sticking out weren't there, because that actually makes it a little harder for the quails to get in and eat. So I have come up with a solution to nip those off. You're going to start with your bottle like this. You want to remove this plastic ring right here. Okay, so I cut that ring off and now it looks like this. That right there where the ring was is exactly where you want the saw blade to go, because we need this lip down here to catch on to the outside of the plastic container so that we can glue it. So you can cut this with a hacksaw, you can use a table saw. That's what I used. So when I used my table saw, that's what it looks like. Probably want to sand that a little bit, file it, or don't worry about it. So you got the one smooth side down here, so just put that up. But yeah, filing it would always be nice. And then you want to cut the bottom off as well, because we're going to need the bottoms. And then I tried cutting here on the circular saw as well, and it got it real chewed up, so I don't recommend cutting the thinner plastic here on, and I keep calling it a circle saw, it's a table saw. It's not even a table saw, what is it? Chop saw! It's a chop saw. Yeah, and then we hot glue it together. So I'll get all my bits and pieces, and then we'll start assembling. And quick thing, I do suggest doing it out of the vitamin water bottles. They are just a thicker plastic, so they will stand up to stuff a lot better. I haven't cut them on the chop saw yet. I'm going to do that once I remove these rings, and I'll see if you can cut through this part as well. So it'll make sense once you see all of the pieces next to each other. Also, I tried to use these PVC cutters to cut the threads off, and it did not work. So there wasn't enough strength and tension on the bottles to allow this to cut through. So if you're going to try that, it probably won't work. So FYI. Okay, here's my chop saw I've been using. It's just a regular wood blade, and because of the guard here, I have to put something more flat so that it doesn't slip under by the blade. So I'm just using this almost used up duct tape roll just to keep it kind of, make it so this will actually go up when it's cutting. And then you just want to line it up right there in between. And this has been real helpful getting the threads off. You don't really need it to cut the bottoms off or the tops. You don't really need it to cut this. I think that would be better done with just like a razor blade. Honestly, I did one to try it, and yeah, it was a good clean cut and everything. But the saw blade wastes a lot of the material that you need for the length so that the birds can get their head into the feeder port. So we're going to finish those up with a razor blade. But I'm almost done chopping off the threads, and then I'll do another clip. Okay, so here is the container that I've picked out. It's the fried pork rinds container from the Sam's Club. They're like $6 or $7 each. I don't know, maybe it's about 2 gallons or 3 gallons maybe even. No, it's probably closer to 2 gallons. Gallon and a half to 2 gallons. But I'm going to make this so that there's ports all the way around it for feeder. I also have another one, might make water out of it, or another feeder. So, yeah, so this is the container. And okay, so I have here our cut bottles with our tops. Our threads are cut off, and the bottom is cut off. So, another thing to note, so I found this out, if you do cut this on your chop saw, you have to go past this indentation here for the bottoms, otherwise you're going to cut that off, and then you'll have a gaping hole in the back which I did not realize was going to happen until I did it. So, see, gaping hole in the back. So, I mean, you could probably fill that in with the hot glue, but just cut it a little bit. If you see the difference, just cut it a little bit taller. Or, if you're going to be cutting the backs off with the razor, definitely cut it on the indentation. So that way you have more space inside the container. It doesn't take up as much space. Because it doesn't matter, you won't cut that part off with your razor. Because you're just cutting the outside plastic. So that's that. And then when you're cutting your tops, you're going to want to cut it basically right where the thickest part is here. Or like just inside of it. So that you don't get any of the curled part. So like right there-ish. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because that you're going to be cutting with the razor. And then I will show you what to do after that. Okay, and then you can discard that piece. So then this will go into this. And then you're like, well, how do they eat? Very good question. We're going to be cutting a slit here and here so that they have an eating port. So you want it to be about the size of the lid, or a little bit wider, so that they have room for their head. Luna, you're in the shot. Yes, I'm not getting the way. No, Luna. No, you're not messing with the camera. And you're going to want to make that slit a wide angle. So, I don't know if you can see it better there. It's a wider angle, so it's closer up here and it gets wider back here. And then, that's hard to do on camera. This is not my favorite light to use. Just be careful, go slow, make sure you don't cut yourself. That's like the hardest cut to make right there, is the one parallel to the threads. Because the plastic is all bent. So now you have this, it's got that opening, and it'll pop inside here a little better too. And then you can adjust it before you glue it, so that this has, you know, it has enough space for the quail heads to peck through and eat. So basically it'll be, container will be right here. They'll eat nom 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 noms. Nom nom noms. So, yeah. Okay, so you're going to want to make some type of measurement so that all of your holes are pretty much at the same level. And it'll be at a level that's good for the birds. So I found that my Sharpie lid is about where it needs to be. So this can be a little hard to show you. But so we're going to try and line this up with the bottom. I'm right-handed, so this works better here. And then make a mark. And that's going to be the center-ish of where you're going to start cutting your stuff to make the hole. So try to make these as even as possible. So I just flipped it over so that it would be, I can see where that mark was. It doesn't have to be exact, but it depends on how many holes you want to put in here. So you want to be able to space them out enough where it's good. So I think I can get 8 on here. Where's that? 7. 7. This one seems a little too close to do another one. But, you know, I'll mark it just in case. And I'll put a little X by it, because that mine might be a little extra. Okay. Like I said, it's not completely exact, but that's okay. And then basically, here's a lid. You're going to want to... What's good about these lids is that they're translucent, so you can kind of see your mark and try to put the mark in the middle. And then you're going to want to draw a circle. Doesn't have to be perfect, this is just kind of a guide. We're not going to be cutting a circle. Remember that, you're not actually cutting a circle. But we need to know about how big it needs to be so that this part can slip through. So this is what it looks like. You can see the circles kind of barely, but so that's that. So what we're going to do is basically do a star pattern. So basically you've got your circle, and then you're going to want to basically cut something like that. And then we're going to go back and trim these off about where the circle is. Okay? And that's going to allow this to kind of push through and then give it some tension so it stays. So I do not know if this plastic is going to crack or not. So I'm just going to go real slow with it. Do some narrow cuts, or not narrow, shallow cuts. Because I don't want to rip the plastic. Because, I mean, the plastic is strong, but it's also brittle. Because if you put too much tension on it, it will snap and then it'll have a crack all the way up. And then it's basically worthless, or you have to do something like this, where I had to fix it because that whole part cracked out. So, like, it's stuff, you can still use it, but it's better if you just go slow and easy. Also, a sharp blade would be good for this. Okay. That, and you want to go slightly past your circle. And if you want to just work on this half. And okay. So, as you can see, now it's got all of that extra there. Don't remember if these will cut them or not. Yeah, okay. So these are regular wire snips, and so you just kind of cut them up. And you gotta be careful with this. You want to stay within where you already cut the plastic, so that way it doesn't, again, rip open the plastic. It's a little bulky here too, towards you. Okay, so we've got our hole. So we're going to do a test fit with this. So you kind of have to work it through. And this is why we need that lip. See? And now it snaps in there. And it's not coming out. What we're going to do is actually hot glue this then, but so you can see here then they can go in and eat the food. Nom 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 nom. And the reason why we have to put this on the back of it is so that the food doesn't just pour in and then pour out. Because I've tried it without putting the backing piece on, and it did not go well. So, this is a pretty nice tight fit. So you just have to do that all the way around. So I did that to show you as a test fit. But really, you should hot glue these on first. Here. And you don't want to put it all the way down inside of here, because then they don't have any room to eat, if you can see that. They don't only have that much space. So you need to kind of play with it to make sure they're going to have enough space to eat, which is about there. And then you just hot glue it. If you want to use some other type of glue as well, you can. But hot glue is your friend. It is hot though, so, and I'm using high temp just because that's what I have, which might be a little precarious because it's hot. Fiddlesticks. I definitely like low temp hot glue better. Doesn't burn as much. But this is what I got. This is what I gotta work with. Also potentially use super glue. I think I'm out of super glue at the moment. Could possibly also use tape. I'm just trying to make it as permanent of a thing as I can. That way I don't have to worry about it coming undone and me having to redo the whole project. But yeah, I think low temp hot glue would be much better than the high temp, because this is kind of melting the plastic a little bit, which is not what you want. So you kind of want to make a seal that goes all the way around. So I dab just a couple of places to get it kind of started and stuck. Okay, and then we're going to let that one dry. And once you have one of these cut from your opening, you can use it as a template guide for the rest of your bottles so that they have the same opening. Just, you know, if it's a really good opening, you want to make sure they're that size, go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark these. And the chop saw does cut these on a slight bit of an angle, just because I had to use the duct tape to make sure the plastic guard didn't get caught in the blade. So it's a very slight angle, but if you're going to take that into consideration, you may want to look at it real close and then see where it's lowest and put that there. So that way they have even less of a threshold to get into the food. So that's that. Also, you can use your razor blade to trim off the extra bits of cutness from the saw. So instead of filing it, you just kind of clean it off a little bit. And it's nice and smooth on the inside, and that's what counts. So yeah, and then you find, see, that's a higher point, this is a lower point over here. So I'm just going to measure that up to the lowest point. And it's a guide. It doesn't have to be perfect, but now I know it should be about there-ish. And then yeah, just keep on doing that for the rest of them, and then cut them off and glue on your bottoms and cut out the rest of your holes on your big container. And then we're going to hot glue it. It's pretty much done. I mean, it's just parts work basically in assembling. If you're using the high temp, you have to go slower, just so you don't end up melting and warping the plastic itself. And what I've been doing, which I just started doing this, and I just found out this works out quite well. So I have an aluminum straw here, so it's kind of like a heat sink, and I can touch it and smooth it and all that stuff. So I'm doing a little dab, letting it set for a little bit, let it settle in. When it cools off just a little bit, then just kind of smooth it a little bit. It gets it into that seam a little bit more. So this way you're actually using less glue, you're putting less heat on it, and it still ends up really solid. Like this one I just did with that type of technique, and it is really solid. And it's not as chunky as this one, and it looks a lot better. So, and what I've been doing for that is actually starting the gluing process on the inside. So, because I want it to sit as flush to the other plastic as possible. So a dab there, gentle, dab there, and then I'm eyeballing a dab for the back. Just let that sit, make sure it's sitting flush how you want it. Make sure it's getting into the crease where it needs to go. Let it sit for a second. Do a couple dabs here and around. Let those cool off, and then just keep going around it in a circle. Little dabs. Okay, I just got done with all of my ports, and then I realized I need to make sure that they can all even fit. So this one's good. I cut this one already, but there is not enough clearance for another port right there. So I'm going to have to glue that back up. Hopefully it'll be good. So this is going to have to be just a really big 4-port container. Maybe if I did the holes differently, it could have been a 6-port, but honestly that could have been a little too tight. I think next time I do something like this, I'm going to make 1 port, and then I'm going to put another port inside, mark it, and keep going around. And I'll get the most amount of ports that I can out of it. But this is going to turn into a 4-port. It will not fit the 8. Like, these are, you know, kind of big, but they allow the quails to come in here and eat. Okay, patch complete. This is a lid of a raspberry container. Hot glued it on, and then I did a lot of hot glue and smeared it around with my aluminum straw to get in between all of the creases of the cuts that I made. So, so there's that. So I'm going to finish doing the other 3 holes that are actually going to work. Okay, once you have all your things, you'll have to pop them through. Now you may have to open up the starbursts a little bit more because they need to be, you know, beyond that circle just a little bit so that this has enough flex to let this rim through, and then, you know, it won't go back in and all that stuff. And we're going to glue that too. Now, make sure you like it first. See, all of those are popped on top of the very bottom ridge, which is great, which means the birds will have full access to the food that drops down there. Yeah, just make sure it's good, and then hot glue those in place, and then this feeder is done. And this makes a good 4-port feeder. I probably could do 5 or 6 in here if I, like I said before, you do 1 and then you put the next one right next to it and outline it from the inside. Probably be able to do 5, maybe 6. But it definitely is not big enough for the 8 like I originally thought. But that's okay. It's all learning. And guess what? It's all trash to usable feeders for quail. I mean, this literally cost me nothing except saving containers that I thought would be useful. So, I'll do another clip once it's all glued up. Before you glue them, make sure that your ports are all the way to the bottom, which is kind of hard to see because everything's clear, but make sure that the hole where you're actually going to have the birds eat through is lined up all the way at the bottom and not cockeyed to the side or the top and they can't even eat. Okay, so there it is, done. All the 4 ports. The backs of these protect the food from just completely spilling out, and it's good that this container has a thing on the bottom so that it raises it up in the middle so that the feed will fall down. I am thinking about possibly putting another bottle top right in here so that it acts as a funnel and splits it. I could do something like that and glue that down so it has a funnel. So it pushes the food to the side so it doesn't just sit in the middle, which I think I am going to do that, yeah. Okay, so that just has a couple of dabs of hot glue on it. Let that fully cool and dry, and the weight of the food will mostly keep it in place. I've done that before with an actual funnel from the dollar store in one of my other ones, and that works fine too, but I've got all these extra bottles laying around. So some of your starbursts that you cut will go a little bit further, like say this one did. So just fill that with some glue, just so that it doesn't tear in the future. But that is the upgraded feeder. Well, upgraded is a loose word. Upgraded from this, at least. Now, I may redo these because I do have to take the threads off of these because it's just a little too wide for them to get in and then get the food with the threads on. That was the whole purpose of cutting the threads off, was that way they only have this much instead of the entire thread head. So just keep that in mind. I hope everyone has found this useful. Okay, and here it is with some food in it, so you can kind of see it a little bit better. That's the patch job I did. But you've got the ports, and it fills up all the way to the bottom, basically, because we put those little stoppers in there. So if you can see in there, see the food doesn't come in because we put the back stopper plates on, aka the bottom of the bottle. So that keeps the food back. And then they have full access to the foods. And I shook it to get it down, so that's why it's so high up in here, but otherwise they'll eat it down. And then it'll just, you know, gravity fill. Okay. See you guys in the next video.